Hey everyone, I'm Coach Chippys and I've been a professional top laner or head coach for the past 8 years. During this time I've reached Worlds and MSI multiple times. Now I'm a full-time coach with a ton of passion towards helping players unlock their potential and climb to their dream rank. How's it going guys? In today's guide I'm going to be teaching you everything you need to know about how to play Olaf. And this champion is quite special to me as it's really just been my pocket pick for the majority of my career, ever since really my first career trip where I got dominated by an Olaf one trick. I learned from him, I picked up this champion, and I've been playing it every year since then. So I'm quite excited to show you guys what I've learned over the years and hopefully you can start dominating in your Olaf games as well. We'll start off by going through the runes. Now, even though Olaf on this season only has one rune page, and to be honest, there's not many interchangeable runes on this page, I still want to go through the reasoning for each one so you can understand why you're taking it and how to use it better. Now, starting with Triumph, this rune really just synergizes with what Olaf wants to do. He wants to skirmish basically as much as possible, and the healing you get on a takedown can be the difference maker between living or dying, because Olaf does really well fighting from low HP because he gets bonus attack speed and he's got lifesteal on top of that. So taking Triumph as well, that'll keep you low HP for longer and keep you fighting for longer is just definitely the rune of choice. As for Alacrity, it's just the most useful of the three by far. The lifesteal one's quite useless as you already have lifesteal in your kit and you'd rather have the higher DPS from having more attack speed. And as for the Tenacity one, taking this one's just trolling because your ultimate makes you unable to be crowd controlled. So why would you need Tenacity in the first place? And for the final one, Last Stand, as we touched on in Triumph, this rune synergizes with being low HP and fighting, which is what Olaf excels at doing. So it's much better to take this rune than the other two. Now, as for the secondary, I have seen people muck around with taking Resolve secondary, trying to get bone plating, overgrowth, and just make your standstill 1v1 stronger, I guess. But I feel like the value gained from inspiration hard outweighs that, because one, if you take Resolve, you have to take Presence of Mind, which means you're not getting cookies for lane, and you're not getting Triumph for skirmishing. And two, if you take Resolve, you're not getting approach velocity. Now, this rune is a huge part of playing Olaf, and I almost never play Olaf without this rune, because this one just opens up so much more solo kill opportunities and trading opportunities even, just from hitting your X, the extra movement speed moving towards them, can make you hit an E in a trade, can give you a kill by being able to chase them down when you wouldn't normally be able to. It will help you pick up your X quicker, so you're getting more X's done. It's just really the best rune to take on Olaf, and even though I love Cosmic Insight, Olaf's probably the only champion I'd play where I'd take the Inspiration Tree and take a different rune, because Approach on Olaf is just so strong, I wouldn't play him without it. As for the last three runes, I normally take double Adaptive Force and either Armor or MR, depending on matchup. And the reason I prefer Adaptive Force more times than not is because Olaf already wins the all-in trades anyway in a lot of matchups. So having the extra AD makes your Qs do more damage, your E do more damage, and it'll make you excel more in shorter trades, where for the most part people won't be taking super long trades with Olaf, because you'll just win, right? You'll pop ulti and just beat them down. Or even level 1, you'll just beat them down. So I like having the Adaptive Force for better short trades, but I will still take attack speed in some matchups where they're forced to all-in you, such as Darius. That's a champion that, if he's running away the whole lane, he's not playing his champ right. He's eventually going to try to fight you and proc his bleed, so having the extra AD, getting more autos down, getting more E resets down, is actually better. Moving on to summoner spells. Now, for your first summoner, you're going to be taking Ghost every game no matter what. Now, even though on the old Olaf, I did prefer Flash in a lot of cases, on the new one, you just need Ghost, because the difference is, on the new one, your ultimate can go indefinitely, as long as you're auto-attacking or hitting E. As long as you're next to an enemy champion hitting them, your ulti will keep going. So Ghost is much longer. Of course, Flash is just one jump, where if you flash auto them, they could flash gap close away and kite out your ulti. But with Ghost, it lasts a much longer time, which means you have a much longer time to stay in the fight, keep hitting, keep your ulti up, and just be a real backline menace. Your second spell is either going to be Flash or Teleport, and I put a huge emphasis on taking Flash, because having Flash and Ghost together on Olaf completely nullifies his weakness of being this low mobile, no gap closer champion that's quite easy to kite. Now that you have Flash and Ghost together, it's really hard for the backline to get away from you and really block you from doing your damage and keeping your ulti rolling, that for the most part, even though it's a little risky in lane to not have teleport, I feel like this is heavily outweighed by the difference in strength you have, not just in terms of getting solo kills in your lane with the 2 spells, but being able to do what you want to do, kill the back line, ignore the frontline CC champions, and really stick onto whatever the control mage, the AD carry, until you kill them. And let's say you're versus Syndra, for the most part, she's just going to have flash. So if you were to ghost at her, she could kite you out, flash away. But if you flash straight onto her head with ghost rolling, she flashes away, and you've got your ulti going, you're going to catch up to her in no time and finish her off. And the only way they can really survive you at that point is if they build Zhonya's, which is really late in the game. But for the most part, having flash and ghost will maximize your chance of being able to get into the backline and do what you want to do. And as for teleport, even though I very rarely take it in solo queue, I have it on here because there are some cases where it's really good. And the main case for me that it makes me take it is if the bot matchup is so volatile that I know no matter what happens top, whoever bot lane wins this matchup is going to win the game. And I know you're probably thinking that's every game, but there are some games where it's more apparent than others. And for example, if I had a Kalista versus Draven, and I'm versus a Dr. Mundo top, even if I solo kill that Mundo 3 times, it doesn't really matter if the enemy Draven just breaks my Kalista's tower. So if I'm able to take teleport, and I kill the Mundo, let's say once, even if I don't kill him, I can use my teleport to help the bot matchup and shut this Draven down before he truly becomes a steamroll. And it'll really increase my chance of winning, as opposed to just dominating this Dr. Mundo, who's just going to be a tanky frontline anyway. Up next we have item builds. Now Olaf actually has quite a few choices for his build, and I'll explain as best as I can. But we're going to start off with starting item, which is quite easy, Doran's Blade or Doran's Shield. And you do want Doran Blade 9 times out of 10 on Olaf, as you're most likely going to get push in your matchup, because your level 1 so strong, they're going to respect you, and your Q is able to hit every minion. It's very hard for champs to push against you. So I will take Doran's Blade in more cases than not. The only time I'll take Shield is if you're versus some really annoying range champion, such as Quinn or Vayne, where it's very unlikely you're ever going to get onto them, and it's kind of hard to get push consistently. So I'd run Doran Shield versus those champs, but for the most part, just go Blade. Now, as for first back purchases, there's an important topic I want to cover on this point, because I see a lot of players mess it up, and that is if you can get cooldown reduction on your first base, it's really OP. Because as you know, Olaf's Q, if you pick it up you get cooldown back, and if you have cooldown reduction already on top of that, you're going to be getting way more Qs way more often, which in theory is just so much more DPS than having a bit more AD, but your axe is on cooldown that whole time. Just getting more axes down as fast as possible is much stronger, because you max Q, it's the strongest spell early game for trading, even trading from far away, and the reduced cooldown on top of cooldown reduction means you get way more axes way more often. But if you can't afford it, or you're building an item that doesn't really have cooldown reduction in it, which is very rare, but the Ravenous Hydra, it's got the hammer, but you can't always get that much money on your first base. So if you can't get it, then it is fine just to stack AD, such as double longs, pickaxe, or get tier 2 boots on your first rush. And even though Tabbies doesn't have cooldown reduction, it's still a really good buy, because if you're versus a champ such as Jax, and you get Tabbies on your first buy, you're going to dominate trades way harder than having Kindle Gem. And of course Tabbies is more expensive, so you get more value out of spending that than a Kindle. But having the extra move speed and tankiness when you already win all in, as long as you don't get bursted, is really strong. So I really value Tabbies on Olaf, but if I'm not getting Tabbies, I'll really try to get cooldown reduction on my first buy. Now moving on to your first item, we have 4 choices, and I did try Duskblade a bit out on Olaf, but I concluded it's just a fun item, and these are the only 4 real choices. And for the most part, the Stridebreaker is the most consistent, so that you'll be buying that more often than not, because move speed slow, everything you want on Stridebreaker, cooldown reduction is nice. And for Triforce, even though the item's really strong on Olaf in 1v1, the build path is so ugly. I hate building this item when you have to go the Axe or whatever, or Sheen. So if you are building this item, most cases I would go Kindle Gem and Ninja Tabbies and Longswords before you buy any of these ugly components like the Axe or Sheen. But once you've got the Triforce complete, it's really powerful. It's just the reason I don't rate it as highly as Stride is just because the build path is so ugly. And for Gore Drinker, this item is good, but you can only build it when you're versus a lot of tanks. I like this one when I'm versus a tank top, tanky jungler. It doesn't have to be double tank, just tanky champs in general. And they have a lot of melees on their comp. This item can be good, but it doesn't feel as powerful as the rest. It's just very safe, very consistent in what it brings you, and it is good when they have a lot of melees and you're versus a tanky champ where you're going to out DPS them anyway, so the Omni Vamp is quite valuable. And for the last one, you have to buy these two together as a pair, Ravenous Hydra and to Jack Show, because if you do a second damage item, you're just the squishiest champ ever, because Hydra gives you basically no defensive stats. And the reason I don't rate Hydra that highly anymore is because it doesn't give Omnivamp, just Lifesteal. So even though the Wave Clear feels quite good, the stats you're getting from the item itself is not that strong on Olaf compared to the other three. But the cases I would build this is when I'm versus tanky comps again, but I'm looking really fed from the get-go. I'm looking really strong, and I'm most likely able to get these two items really quickly, because you spike really hard on these two, because you have a lot of AD cooldown reduction and tankiness from having these two together. It's just as a standalone item, Ravenous Hydra makes you very, very squishy, which is why I don't rate it as highly, but if you're versus tanks and you're getting really fed really quickly, then it is good to get these two. Touching back on Triforce a bit, because I got a little off topic complaining about the build path, the times I would build this are when you're versus a side laning champion that's going to look to fight you 1v1, such as Fiora, Darius, Gwen. These champions excel in side lane, and Triforce is quite expensive, but it makes you very strong in a pure 1v1. So I'd only buy it when you need it, but in solo queue you do verse a lot of champions like that, Riven, Gwen, whatever. You verse them quite often, so you do build Triforce quite often, but I prefer not having to build it. So if you're versus a tank, for example, say you're versus Malphite, you're going to beat them with any of these mythics. You don't need Triforce, so you might as well build the one that's going to help you the most in the team fights and skirmishes, which for the most part will be Stridebreaker, because you're just going to be running through their team trying to break their backline, and Stridebreaker is a lot better at that because it's a slow movement speed and the build path is really nice. All in general, I just rate this item the highest, but you do need to build the other three in some cases, and hopefully this has helped clear up when to build which one. And as for boots, it's pretty straightforward. You'll build tabbies if you need it, and cooldown boots if tabbies aren't that valuable, or if you can buy them in one buy, 950 compared to 1100, a lot cheaper. But I want to touch on the fact that I better not see any of you building Merc Treads. I don't know why, but I still see people build Merc Treads on Olaf at least once or twice this season, and it really stresses me out. So please don't build them, because obviously his ulti blocks crowd control, so they're basically a troll item. And the other two boots are the only ones you'll need, so it's quite easy for you to decide what boot to buy. As for your second item, you do have a few choices, and the reason I have Cleaver and Sterak's highlighted is not because they're necessarily stronger, but just because you build them in more scenarios. Now, for Sterak's, you want to build it if you feel like the game is just perma team fighting, and they have some burst champions, anything like that. This item is stronger for that scenario, for team fights, than Cleaver. But Cleaver is stronger, it's a strong middle ground between being strong in the side lane, because you have a lot of cooldown reduction, which means your 1v1's higher, and you still have a bit of HP from it. And Armor Shred if you're versus a tanky champ. Cleaver is good middle ground between both, and Sterak's is basically pure team fighting. Even though your champ's still strong inside, I'd say Sterak's you build it mainly for team fighting, and for the other two, Death Stance you build it if they have a heavy AD comp, then it's really valuable, even though for the most part, if you're building resist on Olaf, you want HP first, because his ulti actually gives you resistances, so building straight resist is not as effective. But there are some games where you verse a lot of AD champs, say they have solo AP, Fizz, and he's 0-2, whatever, something useless. Then they're basically a full AD comp, and you'd go Death Stance. And the same for more, but reversed, where if you verse a bunch of AP champions, this item can actually be better as a second item. For third item, it's similar to second, the thought process, but there's 3 new items in the mix. And as for Hullbreaker, I'd build this here where you feel like, alright, there's no way we're going to win team fights there. Cog Lulu, whatever, is just way too strong. I'm going to try it in the game through split pushing. Then you'll go Hullbreaker. And for the other two, you go Gargoyles if you already have Sterak's, but now you need Magic Resist. And I really like Gargoyles on Olaf because it catches a lot of people off guard when you're diving the backline. They're going to panic and try to burst you down. And you pop the shield, which means you have more effective HP than they expect, and you're able to kill people you wouldn't normally do. If they were to see how strong you were, they might play differently. But the surprise factor, it shouldn't be a surprise factor, they could press tab, but it still is, of Gargoyles, is quite strong on left. And as for Randurans, I'll just build it with crit champions. You know, if they have Yasuo mid and an 80 carry, this item can be really strong. Now, rounding off the build with the 4th and 5th items, the conditions for all of them are the same, but there are some new ones. And specifically, Spur Visage, the times where this item is really OP is when you have a healing enchanter on your team already. So even though Olaf doesn't have that much healing and shielding, if you're to have, say, a Soraka or a Yuumi on you, and you're running at them with their healing, the Spur Visage actually amplifies their healing onto you, and it makes you a lot stronger than if you're to build another magic resist item. And as for Spirit of Shojin, I normally build this later on where I feel like tankiness is not going to change the outcome. So if they have a high damage champion that it's either I'm going to kill them or they're going to kill me, then I like to go Shojin. So for example, if they have Cog Lulu, building an extra armor item is not going to do anything. By having extra damage and cooldown reduction to one-shot them might actually change the outcome of the fight. We'll finish off by going through some full build examples to help you visualize what it should look like. However, there are some conditions for choosing your second item that I'll touch on here, and that is if you were to go Triforce, you always want Steerax with Triforce, because, or Death Stance or more, basically a survivability item second with Triforce, because if you're just to go Triforce Cleaver, it's just all damage, cooldown reduction, and very low survivability, that you're going to be squishy basically the entire game. And the damage is unnecessary because Triforce gives you so much. So with Triforce, I'll always go mainly Steerax, or Death Stance or more, but for the most part a tanky item. And Stride Breaker is very flexible. You can go whatever item you want, Steerax, Cleaver, or a resist item. And for Gore Drinker, this item gives the lowest damage of the three, so I normally pair this with Black Cleaver so that you actually have some threat. You don't want to be all survivability and no threat, so with Gore, I will normally go Black Cleaver. Up next, we're going to be covering level 1s, and this topic is extremely important because Olaf's level 1 is so powerful, you almost always want to be looking to gain an advantage. And his level 1 is very strong because, of course, as Q, if you pick it up, the cooldown is reduced, so not many champions can beat you at level 1. And whether that be you want to use that advantage to invade the jungler or look to get a really good trade on your lane opponent, whatever you decide to do is strong as long as you plan it in advance. So here I have a Jarvan level 1, his invade is weak, so I choose to just play for my lane trade. And I enter this bush. Now the reason I entered this bush so late is because if I entered it at say 45 seconds, 1 minute, and chunk him, he can just base and walk back to lane and my advantage is nullified. Or his jungler might even come and 2v1 me. So I want to enter here at around 125, 127. So now that if he leashes and comes back to lane, I'm going to get a really good trade. And if he walks up and starts last hitting the minions, I'm going to flank him from this position and get a very good trade. So now he's not a dumb player, he respects, and I decide to zone him between the minions and the tower. And as long as you're hitting him far enough from the minions, they won't turn on you. And I come back for the last hitting, you don't always have to, but the main point is you don't want to be trading when wave 2 is coming in like this, because you don't want the wave to turn on you and ruin your wave state. So now that the wave is settled, I'm back to playing aggressively and zoning in between the minions and the tower. And this whole time, even though I'm giving some gold, I'm gaining all my XP. I'm being aware of where the minions are and staying in XP range, and trying to deny him as much XP and gold as possible. And now, even though I could run at him, wave 3 is coming in, and like we just touched on, I don't want to compromise the state of my wave, so I'm just trading with him, letting the wave settle before I play super aggressively. And when he walks up, I look to trade like that. And the reason you want to go W second is because E, you lose HP and do damage, and if he hits you, it's basically an even trade. But with W, auto W, you get a shield and auto attack reset. It's more of a damage to him, 0 damage to you, 100 to O trade. Anyway, the wave's coming in now, wave 4. It's fine if you crash wave 3, you can always base at that timer if you don't want to be vulnerable to a gank. But here, I'm pretty confident in my ability to 1v2. So I want to crash as slowly as possible and just keep trading on him like this, punish him for each CS he goes for, and here he goes for cannon, and I'm able to punish with the flash auto E. The E will always follow the flash, and here, even though his jungler was coming, I was confident in my ability to 1v2, or at the very least, use my ghost and flash to survive it. And the main reason I got this kill is not because I super outplayed him, great mechanics, anything like that. It's just because I came into this game thinking, what do I want to do level 1? We have Jarvan, don't want to invade. Okay, I'm going to take over his try and look to be as aggressive as possible for the early state of the lane. Now, we touched on using your level 1 to invade the enemy jungle, and I have an example of it here. And Yone's coming with me, which is good. Because, to be honest, if this Lee Sin was more competent, he would see this as a strong invade. Lee Sin, Yone, Olaf, so powerful, and come with us. But he decides to, I don't know, muck around and recall, and he's not joining us. But luckily, my champ is so strong, and Yone's strong too, that we still managed to get this invade out. And I don't even have to use my flash here, I can just ghost him down with my Q level 1, and I've killed the enemy jungler before his buffs even spawned, purely because my champ's so strong. And you could also late invade the enemy red, leave at 125 the dot bush, go in with your jungler. There are a lot of plays you can make, but I hope this showcases the strength, because my jungler didn't even come and help me here, and I was still able to make their jungler's game very hard and burn his flash. Now for this example, I wanted to showcase what happened if you don't get the kill, because you're not always going to get the kill. And here, we have To Counter Olaf really strong. I'm spam pinging invade, let's take his red. Even though he doesn't want to, I'm being quite dominant. And if he didn't come, it's reality, but in the end he ends up coming. And yeah, look, he's trying to leave here, but I'm like, no, let's take this, we're very strong. And in the end, I'll speed it up a bit so we're not just sitting around. The Lee Sin doesn't even end up coming, but we still managed to take the red, which causes a split map, which is quite good for Olaf because he's vulnerable to ganks early. And now I can play as aggressively as possible, because Talia's taking all the camps, and if Lee Sin was unaware of this and enters his jungle, he's got no camps to eat, Talia might even get 3 quadrants of the jungle. So even if you're not able to kill the jungler or even see him, you can still gain an advantage using a level 1. So to quickly recap, as you're entering loading screen on Olaf, you need to be thinking, how can I use my level 1 strength to impact the game? And the main ways of doing so are invading the enemy jungle, making it very hard for him to get his first clear up smoothly, or you want to be looking to find your lane opponent in either tri-bush or river bush and chase them down. And for your third, the last resort, basically, you want to be looking to zone them from XP and gold early between the casters and the tower. Next topic we're going to be covering is the laning phase, and we've used our level 1 in this game to secure red buff for my jungler, not the biggest advantage, but better than nothing. And now that I use my time to help him get red, it's hard for me to zone this guy off the first 3 creeps, because wave 2 will come and turn on me, and it'll just ruin my wave state, and higher chance than not he'll get the XP anyway and just fight me with his wave. So I choose not to try zone him, and I just look to take small trades with my Q. And the best time to use your Q is of course when they go for a last hit, because as they're trying to hit the creep, it's harder for them to dodge your Q. So that's what I'm looking to do, or use my Q when he Qs, because he's temporarily unable to move. And for the most part, I just want to be taking short trades, getting him lower and lower, but I don't want to crash wave 2, because Olaf really excels in having a long lane to chase people down in. So it's a lot harder to chase him down if I'm pushing wave 2 too quickly and he's under his tower. There's no room for me to hunt him down. So I'm just looking to crash this, and I decide I don't know where the enemy jungler is, and my jungler's bot. I'm a bit scared to push this slowly, so I choose to just crash wave 3 and recall. So now I'm safe from whatever the enemy jungler wants to do. Even though he showed bot here, it's still a good time to base and get item advantage. And now, something I want to point out, this guy tries to stop my base and I kill him, that's cool, whatever. But the main point I want to point out is that I didn't pop Ghost and run at him straight away. I waited till as my Q was hitting him before I pop a Ghost. And you don't want to Ghost slightly after your Q hit, you want to pop it as the Q hits him, so you get your Ghost up as fast as possible. And if you were to Ghost too early, he's going to either flash your Q or dodge your Q, then you've wasted Ghost. And if he goes too late, there's a chance he cuts you out properly. So you want to hit that sweet spot of hitting Q on him, of popping Ghost as your Q is basically hitting him. And here I'd love to go Kindle Gem refill, but I can't afford both, so I just go pickaxe. And this one is kind of more matchup specific, where it's harder to chase Aatrox down, he'll just cut you back with Qs and Ws, so just having flat AD is a bit better for me in this case. But if I could have got refillable and Kindle, I would have. But for the most part, this back is good, a pickaxe. And now that I've crashed my wave, the next wave will be coming back towards me. So I'm going to look to play aggressively and chase him down the lane when the wave's outside my tower. And here I ward because my plan was to play aggressively, right? Chase him down the lane. So I want to see where Lee Sin is. But I see that he's there, so I decide not to use my ward, because you don't need a ward if you know where they are, right? If you had God Vision, you wouldn't ward, and I know exactly where he is. There's no point me warding. I know he's going to do Raptors and Krugs, so he's going to be top for a while. So I'm just looking to take trades here, and Talia goes for a gank I don't like because Lee Sin could be here, so I don't want to fully commit. And now the wave's just coming towards me, and I'm going to look to play aggressively when I've got my freeze. And I'm thinning the wave out now, so that when I do freeze, it's not too many minions hitting me. It's not too bad. I should be thinning a bit more, but I am respecting Lee Sin at this timer. That's why I ward the lane in case he lane ganks. And then I'm just looking to thin the wave and try to hold it here. Not the best hold, to be honest. Could have done better. Not my best performance. But now the wave state is in a good position because of how I played my early lane, that he's actually gankable. And even if my team didn't come, I would have looked to all in him at that timer, but they come and take the free kill, which is good. And it's a big testament of why I really value recalling it either wave 3 or wave 4, because the wave's going to come back to you when you're level 4, when Olaf's quite strong. It's really easy for you to fish for these gank kills or solo kills, where if you just stay in the lane the whole time, trying to poke them under tower, there's a good chance you either get ganked or die, or you lose your opportunity to recall, because you don't have TP, you don't want to get stuck in the lane for too long. So for the most part, I really value basing after either the first 4 waves or 3. So now from this point, the wave is coming back towards me as I just crashed it before, and I'm close to ticking 6, and my ghost is nearly up. Now, I want to be using the long lane to chase him down, so even though I could win trades at this point, I want to let the wave come towards me before I look to trade. So that's a good concept to keep in mind, that even though you can win trades most of the time as Olaf, you need to pick the timing for it. Because even though you can win trades, if they're under the tower, you're not going to be able to kill them. So you want to be taking small trades and not damaging the wave too much and let it come towards you. And then, once you have the freeze outside your tower, then you look to utilize the long lane to gain solo kills. So here, my ghost is just popping back up, I can get Q, so I tried to Q and get 6 and hit him at the same time. And if that X hit him, I would have put ghost, but unfortunately I missed. And now I want to cover an important metaphor, basically, where getting solo kills as Olaf is basically like fishing, where if you're on the boat trying to fish with the boys, you don't want to dive into the ocean and grab the fish, right? You're just chucking out your hook and you're waiting for it to hit. And Olaf's Q is basically the hook, where I want to be chucking out hooks with my wave state like this, chucking out X's, and as soon as one hits, then I pop Ghost and ulti and run at him. I don't pop Ghost and run at him beforehand and try to hit him with the X. I wait for it to hit and then commit. Even if it takes 3 or 4 X's, as long as he's trying to get experience, eventually one will hit. And here, boom, as soon as this X hits, Ghost ulti, run him down. Where if that X missed, I would have gone back to my wave and looked to fish all over again, looked to start it again. But luckily that one hit and I was able to instantly pop my combo and run him down. So I want you to keep that in mind, that basically solo killing them in lane as Olaf is like fishing, where you don't want to start the combo by running them down, you want to be starting it with your Q. Now up next, I wanted to show another example of a laning phase, because of course in the last one, he basically let me solo kill him by making a big mistake. So I wanted to showcase an example of how a lane should play out if you don't gain a solo kill. Now here I'm versus Riven, and if you were to have Ignite, the lane would be slightly different. I wouldn't be able to be this aggressive early, but I noticed he took Teleport for some reason, so I looked to take an aggressive trade here. But if I do this and there's Ignite, it's not very favorable for me. But now, even though the trade is quite even, I'm going to get push. He doesn't have as much kill threat without Ignite, so this is a good state for me. And now I'm just thinking, my jungler's pathing down, his is pathing up. I want to base after wave 3. And I would try early because Viego could do a level 3 gank. His champion could if he wanted to. But for the most part, Viego wants to full clear, so I'm not super worried as long as I'm not playing very disrespectfully. So now I'm just trying to get this wave in cleanly, wave 3. And I actually pushed too fast here. This is a mistake on my end, but because I took good trades beforehand, it ends up being okay. This is never really a lane state you want to be in, where he can farm almost under tower and trade with me and escape back to tower. But because my trading was good early, it makes up for my later mistake. And now I'm just looking to crash this wave. Now, if my jungler was pathing up, we could probably dive him here. But I accept reality, my jungler's gone down or even died here, I think. Done something dumb. So I look to crash in base. And because I crashed my wave too fast, wave 2, I have to crash wave 4 instead of wave 3. Which is not ideal, because if Viego didn't fight mid, then I would probably have died in this, well, not died, burned my sums in this game. But it ends up being okay. So that's another good, even though I didn't get punished for it, that's a good example of why you shouldn't look to push wave 2 too quickly. But now I get my wave crash in, I'm able to base, and it's hard for him to push this next wave in because level 3 Riven, his wave clear is not super high and he's 1 HP. And I look to base and run back. Now the reason I picked Ruby Crystal over Longsword, it's just because, one, it's more cost efficient, right? Well, not cost efficient, it's more stats, because 400 gold versus 350. And also, Olaf's base damage is so high that as long as you're not getting bursted, as long as you're alive, hitting them, it's better to have more survivability, especially early lane. So I got my Ruby, I'm coming back, and my wave's coming towards me, which, as we touched on before, when your wave is outside your tower, that's when you want to look to go fishing, hit your hook, and look to ghost them down. So now I look to take some trades. And basically, I see this opportunity to all in him. And because he doesn't have Ignite, I see it as long as I'm able to dodge his Q, which I do there, and I get this kill. Now, to be honest, that one is more knowing the limits of Olaf, which will come with experience, but the main thing I want you to take away from this is the thing I've shown in both games, where I've gotten my wave crashed in, wave 3 or wave 4, and I've let the wave come back towards me before I look to trade super aggressively and ruin the wave, and then I'm just looking to ghost them down with the extremely long lane that we've opened up. And as long as you can practice and apply this concept in your games, you'll get a lot more solo kills than if you were to just perma push the lane without thinking. Now that you understand the laning a bit better, we're going to be covering matchups. Now, something extremely important I want to cover is that a lot of these matchups are different depending on if they take TP or Ignite. So, for example, literally we just showed one where I versed a TP Riven and I was able to play extremely aggressively. Where if he had Ignite, same with a lot of these champions, Rumble, Jax, Fiora, Gwen, champs like that, where if they take Ignite, it's a lot harder for you to win the all-in if they're full HP. Because they can burst you down, block your healing. The extra damage is actually the difference maker from you living or dying. Because Olaf generally wins in a sustained damage fight. Because his Q and E cooldown is so low, as long as he's constantly hitting them and picking up his axes. Whereas a lot of these champions have longer cooldowns than you, so if they're able to burst you down with Ignite before you can showcase your sustained damage, then they're going to win. So it's important to know you have to play less aggressively if they have Ignite, and more if they're TP. And if they have Ignite, basically the way you'll play differently is you'll take smaller trades first, hit axes on them off cooldown, wait for them to get about half HP, bit lower depending on the matchup, but you want to get them low before you look for your all-in, because their full HP versus full HP all-in is stronger with the Ignite. So starting with the hard tier, now with Vayne, the only reason it's here is because if you were to verse an extremely good Vayne top player, this is the hardest matchup you can play for Olaf. But luckily there's almost no good Vayne top, so you don't have to worry about it. And the other two, Pantheon and Rumble, these champs are just so hard for you to ever get a chance to all-in because their all-in is really strong as well. And when they take Ignite, it's very hard for you to ever win an all-in versus them, and they also have trading abilities to poke you down as you go for CS. Now moving down to skill matchups, it's important, like we touched on before, to register if a lot of these champs have Ignite or TP and play accordingly. But for the most part, I just want you to keep these matchups in mind, as you can win them if you are playing better than your opponent, but you're not always going to win them. So through trial and error, you'll find out which matchups you'll get pushed in and which ones you won't. And the reason I don't want to tell you directly, you should get pushed in these ones, you should not get it in these ones, is because Olaf, especially across different ranges, different tiers of ranks, you can get pushed in a lot of matchups where they should get pushed just from playing with more confidence, hitting your Qs off cooldown, hitting the creeps as well. You'll actually be able to ego a lot of push where you can't normally. So I want you to experiment and find out through trial and error when you should get push or when to concede push, because you can get pushed in basically all of these matchups if you're playing more confidently than them. Moving down to the Olaf side of matchups, just because these are in your favor does not mean you should be completely stomping them throughout the entire course of the lane. A lot of these champions actually have timers where they can win trades versus you. All it means is that for the majority of the lane you will be winning if both sides are playing well, and to keep that in mind, you're up against these matches, if you're counter picking especially, or if they pick these into you, there's a good chance you'll win it as long as you're playing well and applying the concepts we've covered already. Finishing off with the free matchups, these are the matchups you should be winning almost every time. However, there's something important I want you to keep in mind, that a lot of these champions have pretty good gank setup. So even though you dominate them for the majority of the lane, pre-6, when Olaf is at his most vulnerable, there's a good chance he's going to be calling for his jungler. So you have a Shen or Maokai, these champs have really good crowd control, and you don't have your ulti. There's a high chance you'll die to their jungler, get behind, and then you'll be struggling in a matchup where otherwise you'd be completely dominating. Where if you're to just play to your limits, not play scared, play aggressively of course, but respect where the jungler is and play in accordance to that, and survive until level 6, get your tier 2 boots, get your cooldown item, then there's a good chance you can 1v2 them in the jungler as long as you're not behind at that point. Up next is Olaf's identity, and his main identity is the fact that he's this powerful bruiser that wants to run through your team and disrupt the backline. And it's easier said than done. I see a lot of Olafs, they just blow their combo straight away, they ghost ulti, and just run at the AD carry and hope they kill him. Where it's not that simple. You really need to apply this first concept I'm going to teach, and that is wait for your time to strike. which is basically you have to get a good overlay of the fight before you run in. You need to see where everyone is, what's happening, and you need to wait for an opportunity to arise. You can't just see 5 champs and run through them and kill the AD carry. And sometimes you might be able to, and it might work, but if you truly want to grow as an Olaf player, you need to stop and see what's going on and wait for the perfect time to strike where maybe the AD carry splits off from his team, or maybe he wastes a cooldown, maybe he wastes his gap closer, his flash, and then it's a lot easier for you to run at him and take him down. And I've got an example here where they're all together, the Cassio burns my ulti with her flash ult, and if I were to run in here, Pop goes and just run at them, the Varus Heimer Cassio comp, they'll just instantly kill me. They're quite strong at this point in the game, and there's no way I can survive them. So I'm kiting in and out of the fight, propping Stride Breaker, trying to get my slows down, but I'm not running straight through them and just getting completely one-shot. I'm waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike, and this Varus gives it to me. As soon as I see him split off from his team, I snipe him with an axe, flash on him, and take him out. Where if he was to just kite back down the lane with his Heimerdinger and Cassio, who do a lot of damage, and they thrive when champs are running at them, I would get instantly killed trying to flash onto his head. But the second he makes that mistake of splitting from his team, I take that chance to flash on him and take him out. Where if I was impatient, if I was to ghost in at the start of the fight, I would have died definitely. Or if I was even the second part of the fight, if I were to run chase down the lane, I would have died as well. But eventually, in solo queue, almost always, someone will make a mistake, and as long as you haven't already blown your combo, you'll be able to punish it. And the second point of Olaf's identity is something that not a lot of people think about, is the fact that Olaf has an extremely fast Baron. Now, when you ves champs such as Cassiopeia or Aphelios, you're expecting them to try rush down Baron early on in the game. But a lot of people overlook the fact that Olaf can do a very similar thing, and the reason he can is because his E, at this point in the game, 20 minutes, will be doing between 360 and 420 roughly true damage, depending on how strong you are, and you'll be able to get so many E's off, especially if you tank the Baron, where normally tanking Baron makes you do reduced damage, but for Olaf's E, which is true damage, it doesn't matter at all. So you actually want to get slightly low from the Baron, where you get more E's off because you get more attack speed, and you're able to clear it even faster. And in this example here, we have the worst Baron comp. We have Kassadin, Caitlyn, Sejuani, Milio. None of these champs do damage to Baron except me. But because I'm playing Olaf, we're able to get Baron, and we're able to win this game, where otherwise we might be losing. And the final point of Olaf's identity is you want to be involved in as many early skirmishes and fights as possible. The reason for that being is Olaf comes online around 1 to 2 items is really his sweet spot, and especially if you're ahead and you've got Mythic when not many other champs do, you'll be most likely the strongest unit on the entire map. And if you're able to be a part of as many fights as possible, you can really snowball the game early before your champ starts to fall off. Now, Olaf doesn't fall off as hard as he did in the past, but he's still way stronger around the 10 to 15 minute mark than he is later on in the game. So if you're able to abuse as many fight timers as you can by being at every dragon, every herald, full HP, or if your items bought, ready to fight, then there's a high chance you can snowball the game. However, that doesn't mean you want to be delusional about it. If you can't fight the dragon because someone on your team got caught or they're basing, then you don't have to fight it, obviously, if you're going to lose it anyway. It just means you want to be ready. You don't want to be the one making the mistake and causing your team unable to fight dragon. You want to be ready for every scenario where you could be involved in a skirmish or a fight, and you do that by having good base timers and making sure you're not on the map when you're unable to fight. Up next, we're going to be covering team fighting, and for the most part, team fighting on Olaf is extremely simple. There is a few concepts I want you to keep in mind that will help you maximize the impact you can have in these fights. First one being, you want to be flanking from either the side or the back. However, I found that flanking from the side is much better, because if you're flanking them from behind, your champion is not very mobile. It'll take you a long time to catch up to them, where they can just turn on your team. However, if you're unseen, if they don't know you're coming from behind, it can be quite powerful, which is why you should be going sweeper when you want to be looking to flank. However, for the most part, if you just flank from the side, where you're close enough that you can group with your team if needed, by literally running through the enemy team if you have to, or you're close enough that if they turn on you, your team will help you, or if they turn on your team, you can help them. So I have an example here, where I flank from the side, and I'm applying the earlier concept we talked about where I'm not blowing my full combo straight away. I'm waiting for them to use spells and they get baited in by Silas. And then I start committing. Where this whole time, even though I do want to primarily be killing Lucian, you saw I got some autos on Riven there to keep my ulti going. Because Olaf's ulti, it's extended as long as you're getting autos or ease off. So even if you're not hitting the prior target, the one you want, you would need to be hitting somebody to keep your ulti going the whole time, or your ulti's going to time out, they're going to crowd control you, and your champ will be a lot less powerful. The next point is look to get a cheese off if you can. Now, of course, you can't always get a cheese off, that's ideal, but if you're always looking to cheese the opponent when they're trying to group up, then your champion will be a lot more powerful. So I have an example here where I saw Xerath clearing bot wave, which means to group with his team, he has to rotate through the jungle. And while he's rotating, I'm already hiding in this bush, I go on him, and even if he flashes away, I can follow, but basically, there's no way out for him. Where if the fight was downriver, and I was trying to ghost at him and chase him down, he'd have a lot more avenue to kite me, to flash walls, and make it really hard for me to get onto him. But if I'm starting the fight already onto him, there's really nothing he can do. So even though this won't be replicable every time, as long as you're looking for it and you're able to keep in mind this is an option, then you're going to get more cheeses off than if you just weren't thinking about it at all. And the final point, even though we're touching it already, I want to reiterate it because it's important, and that is wait for your time to strike. You don't always have to start the fight by running through the entire enemy team. There are times where you can do that, but a lot of times you want to wait for them to make a positioning error or waste their gap closing abilities before you burn your ghost ulti and run right through. Because if you run through at the start and they have all their spells up and they're positioned in the best possible spot they can be in, it's a very low chance you can keep your ulti going the whole time, you can kill their backline without them bursting you down. But if you wait for some chaos to happen, for this fight to be more split up, their formation to break, there's a much better chance you're going to be able to carry the team fights than if you were to just start the fight mindlessly. Up next, we're going to be covering drafting, and it's important for you to know if you're going to be adding Olaf to your champion pool, what are the conditions that make him good? When is he strongest? When is he weakest? And we'll go through the examples of champions that increase his value when he sees them on the enemy team. So here, let's say for example, they pick Twisted Fate and Varus. These champions have very low mobility and quite low damage compared to other champions in their role. And the only way they keep themselves alive is TF, W, and Everfrost, Varus ulti, self-peeling with their crowd control, that Olaf completely ignores, and he can actually just run through their spells and kill them. And for example, jungle as well, if you do verse a Skarner, for example, Skarner ult, Skarner, all he has is crowd control, so that the chance you can 1v2 the enemy top and jungle is very high, which means you can play more aggressive in side lane, and more aggressive in teamfight, because all their peeling tools are blocked by you completely. The only way to peel Olaf is damage, and all these champs we have on the screen here, not all of them, but mainly the green ones, are quite low compared to other champs in their role, and high CC to make up for that. So Olaf's very good versus all of these champions, but primarily the highlighted ones, and as soon as you see any of them, it should be giving you alarm bells like, okay, Olaf's going to be good here. They've picked Ashe, Nautilus, they've picked TF, Alistair, champs like that. As soon as you see that, you know the value of Olaf is increasing. Now for the champs that decrease Olaf's value. If I see these champs on the enemy team, any one of them, it'll make me much less likely to want to play Olaf in the first place, but especially the ones in green. For me, these are deal breakers because Kindred, for example, he can get long range, high damage, he can kite you, and if you're to ever actually get onto his backline, he can just pop ulti and you're unable to burst them, they'll get you 1 HP, and as soon as the ulti runs out, you're just going to die. And same with, similar to Vayne, where she's got invisibility, true damage, she can just burst you before you even touch her, that it makes your champion useless. If I'm wanting to pick Olaf and I see Vayne Lulu, for example, picked, I'm not playing Olaf that game, my champ's going to be useless. So for the champs in green, these are deal breakers for me, where I won't want to play Olaf no matter what. And the champs in white, they just make me more hesitant to pick him. But if the rest of the comp Olaf is strong against, then I'm still okay to verse a Lucian. If I'm verse a Malphite top Sedge jungle, for example, my champ's still going to be good. But for the most part, these are just champs to keep in mind, because they do make Olaf less valuable. But except for the green ones, they would not be deal breakers. So just keep in mind if they have a lot of these champs in white, that you might not want to play Olaf. And if they have a lot of champs from the earlier page, then Olaf is stronger. Up next, we're going to go through a full gameplay example where I talk you through my thought process throughout the entire game. And in this example, it's from a recent solo queue game I played where I'm versus Ignite Fiora. And this matchup can be quite difficult. I know a lot of people struggle with Fiora, but especially when she takes Ignite, this matchup can be quite challenging, which is why I opted to go Doran's Shield, so that I could stay higher HP and limit her all-in opportunities. And here, my thought process is just, I want to trade her Q for my Q auto, basically, and stay higher HP than her. And the trading is going pretty good. We're about even, and she goes level 2 first and tries to all-in me. Now it's important to note I'm not just running away, because I'm 1 creep off 2 myself, and I know Olaf's 2, when you're low HP and you have your W, is extremely strong. So I managed to get the solo kill, and the main point of that, the way I managed to get that kill, is because I didn't just stand and fight her, I didn't just run away from her, I kited her. I kited her while hitting the creep, managed to get level 2 while picking up my axe, and then used that to solo kill her, basically. It's important to note that a lot of kills on Olaf, you don't want to just be in a standstill battle hitting them, you want to be moving between autos, picking up your axe, and really getting as many axes down as you can. Now I recall after crashing wave 3, and it's important to note even if I didn't get the kill, I would base at this timer, because as we know by now, I want the wave to come towards me to make a very long lane for me so I can look to chase her down, and I opt to go 2 long swords and refill. Now I could have gone Kindle Gem in one pot, that would have also been a really good recall, however I want the extra damage mainly because I know she's going to be playing aggressively, so I want the higher AD ratios to get better trades, but also because Sejuani is going to be top on this timer, and although she has a lot of crowd control, she doesn't have that much damage, so I really wanted to bring the damage, and she bring the beef, realistically. But for the most part, Kindle Gem and a normal pot will never let you down, but you can go double sword and refillable if you want to play that way, play a bit more aggressively. So now wave's coming towards me, and this trade is not ideal, but I'm just trying to thin the wave out as much as I can, because I can't block 20 creeps from hitting tower, but I can block around 8. So I'm trying to thin it as much as I can. And Sedge chooses to attack mid, and I'm just doing my best to freeze this and make her feel scared as long as possible, because Sejuani won't always be mid, she'll eventually have a timer to come. And this wave state is not the best freeze, it won't freeze for very long, but it's good enough for me to be able to trade with her while being under tower, so that when she W's me like that, she can't chase me down at all. And now that her W's on cooldown, I have an opportunity to trade onto her. So I'm mainly bashing the creeps to thin it also, but also to get a lot of lifesteal down. And now Sejuani, she's got free time now. I've held this freeze long enough that Sejuani's finished what she wanted to do, and she was able to come up. And we kill the Fiora. And again, I crash my big wave, and I base, because I want the wave to come back towards me, and I never want to be stuck in this lane. Where I see a lot of players make the mistake here of, Fiora's still dead, I can go get a tower plate. But it's just not worth it. The gold you get from the plate is not worth ruining your lane state. Almost never. So now I start heading back to lane, and I really want to add on that in this game I do build Duskblade, and I don't recommend that at all. I was just testing it for the guide, basically. I wanted to see if it was ever worth buying it, so I tried it in 5 or 10 games, and I concluded it's not worth to buy Duskblade, but it's extremely fun. So if you're playing normies or something, and you want to have a good time, then Duskblade is very fun because the build path's nice, and it's just pretty funny being a untargetable Olaf. But if you're trying to, your hardest to win, basically, then I wouldn't recommend it. But in this game I do build it as I was testing, and even though it's not the best item I could buy, the build path is nice, so now I have hammer, longsword, and again my wave is coming back towards me. So I want to look to be trading onto her when she goes for CS. And I'm keeping in mind I don't want my axe to hit too many creeps, even though I make that mistake there. I'd recommend just letting the wave come to you. But my wave state's still good because she also is making wave mistakes and whacking the creeps for no reason, so the wave's still coming back towards me. So every time she looks, I'm going to go onto her, and the reason I ghost onto her now was because there was a brief window where she was 5 and I was 6, where if I hit the X that I missed, it would be a kill, but because I missed the X, I have to kite out her ulti, and luckily my Twitch is here, for some reason, to counter gank, but I made a mistake there, so even though I'm not playing as well as I could be, you can still learn from what I should have done, which is what we've seen before. I let the wave come to me before I look for my all-in, so I have a lot longer of a lane state to chase her down, and also if I do get counter ganked or ganked while during my all-in, I'm a lot closer to my tower, so it's a lot less risky. But it works out in this timer because I had Twitch, which is nice of him. So now my mindset heading back to this lane is yet again, my wave is coming back towards me. I'm going to look to trade very aggressively on the wave and look to freeze it outside my tower. And even though you won't have the same spike as me because you shouldn't be building Duskblade, you'll still be very strong at this timer. Even if you're building for Stride or Triforce, you'll still be a lot stronger at this time. So that if they go for the wave here, you can look to all in. So I'm thinning the wave a bit. I don't want too many minions to deal with. And I'll look to punish her on this cannon. Now, unfortunately, I missed my axe. You can't hit them all. But my jungler sees my freeze yet again, and he chooses to punish. And it's important for you to keep this in mind. You probably see it a lot in this video by now that every time I crash a big wave and the wave comes towards me, I'm either getting a kill from it, chunking them, or a gank from it. Because my wave state is so favorable, it's almost too tempting for my jungler to turn it down. And even though he doesn't have to come, and in every game he won't, there'll be a lot of games where he should come but he doesn't because it's solo queue. More often than not, your jungler wants to win the game, so if your lane state's very good and he can kill this Ignite Fiora with no flash, he's going to take it. And now I choose to go for plates here, even though it's bad for my tempo. I choose to go for plates here because basically I can proxy the wave between the tower, and also my jungler is still on my side of the map, so it's fine for me to stay, and I managed to get the solo kill. Now, if my jungler was bot, like went straight bot after the kill or recalled, I probably would have based for good tempo there, but because I know I can play super aggressively and he's got my back, I do so. So now from this point I'm going to speed it up a bit because you don't want to see me walk back to lane all day. But you see the main point of, instead of just keeping her stuck under tower by pushing the wave as soon as it comes in and not really giving myself an opportunity to kill her, I'm letting the wave come back to me so that she's out of her tower, she's scared of gank, she's scared of being chased down the lane, and if she disrespects that fear, then she'll get punished for it. But now from this point in the game, I'm so strong that I don't need to keep playing for freezes because 1, Herald's up. I don't want to be freezing when Herald's up. And 2, I'm so strong I can look to dive around the tower if she makes a mistake. So I'll slow it back down. And I'm just looking to trade with her when she CS's, and if she takes a bad enough trade or makes a mistake, I'll look to dive her. I'm pretty sure she does that here. Yep, she wasted W. As soon as I see that's gone, her only defensive tool, I look to all in her. And even though my damage is quite high with the Duskblade, it'd be the same with any item. If I Triforce, Stridebreaker, he'd still die there. The concept's the same. And now, if I was playing very smart, I would take 2 plates in base here. But I'm pretty sure I'd disrespect because I'm feeling overconfident due to how strong I am. And I want to try fight her between the waves again. But here, if I just took 2 plates, cleared the wave and based, I'd be in a really good state. But I'm pretty sure I muck around and try to fight her between the tower, which is a very bad idea. But I'm just feeling too confident with how strong I am, and I have to flash away. And even though it's bad, I didn't die, so it's not the worst thing in the world. It's just a bad habit for me to do, feeling over strong, feeling overconfident. But for the most part, I got my tabs and some rubies. And the reason I like double ruby on this buy instead of, say, pickaxe is just because I'm already got so much damage. Even if I Triforce, I'll do the same. I just need more survivability. So I go double ruby, building towards my Sterex. And I'm looking to break the tower now. And Twitch comes to help me so I can play super aggressive. And just build this wave together and look to break tower. And as I get... It's fine for me to play that aggressive because I had Twitch, so you can counter gank anything that pops up. And then Sejuani decides to pull up as well. My goal here is just to break the tower, but if they give us free kills, I will take them, of course. And then I just want to be breaking this tower, clearing the wave, and basing yet again. You never want to be overstaying on the map when you're not in a position to fight. So here, no ulti, low HP, got some money in the bank. I'm not in a position to fight, so I just want to recall and get back on the map as fast as possible. Now I'll keep speeding up the walk back to the lanes. There's not much point, but my thought process is I don't want to run straight bot here, even though they are hitting our tower, because Fiora could push that wave all the way to my tower and break plates, when right now he's the most useless champ on the entire map. I don't want to give him 2 tower plates for free, so before I do anything, I want to make sure he's getting nothing, which means I'm going to pin him under this tower and fog, like we talked about in another video, where as long as the enemy top laner is stuck under the tower, and you're fogging between the lanes, like here, any play you make is going to be beneficial because he can't get anything in return. So I'm just keeping him stuck under tower, and I'm eating the camps. And even though I dropped this wave, in my opinion, getting red buff for it is fine because Fiora doesn't really have any engage anyway. If he left his lane at this time, he wouldn't be able to do anything. And I'm still just looking to control mid and top. And here, dragon spawning soon, and I see their bot lane, their body language has been quite aggressive. I think I've shown this example in another video, but it's still a good example, where because their body language showed they were playing aggressive, I hovered mid here to punish if they were to leave their tower. And now from this point in the game, their bot lanes, even though they're strong, I haven't seen this Olaf the whole game, he's been fogging between the lanes, and if I leave my tower, he's going to come kill us. So now, even though they're strong, they're going to feel hesitant to push their lead because they're scared of basically what I'll do. And now that I've made a play mid, I have to return to my wave and fix it, because Fiora, being this weak Kindle Gem Hammer champion at this point in the game, I don't want to be giving her a tower and all the CS and XP for no reason. So I push the wave in, and most likely I'll look to base, because I'm not in a position to fight, like we talked about. Every time you're unable to participate in a fight, you should be trying to base and get back on map as fast as you can, which is exactly what I do here. And here I choose to buy Styrax because, like we said in the item build section of the guide, let's view Duskblader's Triforce for this example. It's a full damage mythic. You don't want to be doubling up. You don't want 2 full damage items on Olaf. You want, if your damage is mythic, you generally want to go Styrax second, or at least some sort of tanky item. Death Stance more, something like that. But because in this game their damage is pretty evenly spread, I want to go Styrax. I definitely would have gone Death Stance if their Cassiopeia wasn't really strong. But because they basically broke the bot tower there, that means I need to not only stack armor, I need to build some magic resist or health at the very least. And here I'm just keeping this Fiora trapped. And if my team weren't helping me, if Twitch and Sidge weren't here, then I'd be threatening mid. But because they're helping me, I don't want to waste their resource. I want to be looking to break this tower and use their time effectively. But if they were playing the other side of the map, then I would look to impact mid here. But because they gave me some resources, we were able to kill Fiora, break the tower, and then look to threaten tier 3, which makes them respond. And now that they've left mid, my Xayah is able to break some towers and get an advantage of her own. From this point in the game, I'm building towards Death Stance because even though Cassio is quite strong, they are still full AD, so the armor is quite valuable. And also, Death Stance is just a really strong item on Olaf. And even though Cassio is strong, I've already got HP at this point. I'm not only armor, so I'm not super afraid of her. And now I'm heading back to my wave because I don't want to be giving Fiora stuff for free when I'm trying to carry the game, basically, when I'm trying to impact the map. I want to first set up my lane state so that she doesn't get anything. And here she disrespects the wave because she's got her Sunderer, so she's feeling quite strong. But I'm still stronger because I played my early game well. But as you can see, the 1v1 is actually quite close, which shows that the matchup is actually quite difficult for Olaf, but luckily we were able to gain a pretty nice advantage in the lane. But for the most part, this matchup is quite challenging, but the reason I don't put it in the hard tier with the other matchups is just because you should be able to win this lane, the lane phase itself, if you are confident, and it's not until she gets her full mythic that it becomes super challenging. Like you saw there, it was quite a close 1v1, even though I have such a big item advantage. And now I was fogging between the lanes, we managed to kill them, I fail a flash, and I want to do Baron on spawn, because like we talked about, Olaf's identity, he has an extremely fast Baron. And I don't know why I was recalling there, my brain must have been turned off, but I want to be rushing this Baron down with the boys. And luckily, we were able to get it in basically 20 seconds. So now I'm coming back onto the map, everything's good. Now from this point in the game, I'm the strongest unit on the map, I've got Death Stance, and I want to fight this dragon that's spawning soon. And to do that, I want to make sure our side waves are good first. And top wave's okay, but I'm heading to fix bot wave, but I noticed Katarina's going straight for it. And even though I didn't want her there, I wanted her grouped in me bot, I made a mistake. I just said, okay, you do what you want, and I was the one that grouped with the team. But in hindsight, I should have either pinged her more to group with the team and leave, or I should have just duo laned with her, because I knew she was going to die when I saw that. But I wasn't decisive enough. I just thought, I hope she doesn't die. I didn't think that, basically. I just thought, okay, you do what you want, I'll group with my team. But in hindsight, I should have been more of a commander in this game, more of a leader, and forced her to group with the team, or even if I duo laned with her to avoid this mistake. But now that she's dead, that's reality. I tell my team, don't do dragon. If we fight 4v5, it's the only way we lose. Basically, I do that by pinging. I don't need a type. And then I choose to play super aggressively on the other side of the map. And I managed to kill Fiora. And then their dragon's done, so on this time I have to be more respectful. And even though I was respecting, the jungler looked for me, but because I had told my team in advance, give dragon control top jungle, my jungler's here, and he's able to counter gank for me. And from this point, even though it's hard for me to be a part of a fight with no ulti, I'm still relatively strong enough to brawl, so I want to stay on map because my team has Baron, and they're pressuring quite hard. I don't want to be recalling now. And Sejuani's doing a great job of controlling both top and mid, So I choose to keep going. Even though I'm not in my peak condition to fight, I'm still relatively strong enough that even if she goes on me like this, I can fight her back. And again, Sejuani's doing a great job this game, playing between the lanes. Props to him. And we're just really hard controlling mid and top at the same time. But now from this point, it's really hard for me to fight at all. So if anyone was to rotate to me, I'd most likely back off. But because no one's coming to me, I'm able to break in before I base. And now for the final sequence, it's just trying to end the game. So we head to Baron out of base. And the reason I want to go Baron here and not just Ego the Nexus is because we are stronger than them, but it's not as one-sided as it was now. So if we have Baron and we're Baroning up the two super waves, it's really hard for them to fight us. They have to engage on us, because if they don't, the minions are just going to end the game. So we can basically look at them with our super minions hitting their base, and they have to engage on us and get hit by all the creeps and take a fight outside of their laser, or it's just not favorable for them. So we look to do Baron, and the only way we lose is if they steal it. So Sejuani, playing this game really well to be honest, blocks the Kayn. We get Baron, and then we look to end the game. So I'll jump it up a bit. And for the most part, I'm pretty sure it's just a clean final team fight. I'll slow it down. Sejuani goes in first. And I don't want to be running in here straight away because I don't have Ghost. I'll be unable to really reach Cassio before she chunks me. So I'm just playing it slow, and now as soon as Sedge manages to stun Cassio, that's my time to shine, and I go in. And yeah, we're able to clean them up and end the game. So hopefully this full game example helped with some points of the game, especially mid-game. I feel like it'll be quite helpful for you learning that Olaf is not a split pusher. You're not really going to break towers in front of people for the most part, but you're going to use the side lane to make the enemy top laner stuck, and then you're going to look to be a part of as many skirmishes or fights as you can. Up next, we're going to be covering how to counter Olaf, and if you've been struggling with versing Olaf in solo queue, then I've got some advice that will help you a lot. And the first one being, set up a gank before he hits level 6. Now, of course, your jungler won't always take this opportunity, but if your lane state is really good and it's basically a free kill, more often than not, he will come. And the best way to set up a good lane state is if you can force Olaf to try to crash wave 2. And you can do that by standing behind his creep so that when he axes you, and hits all of his wave 2 minions and you at the same time, he's most likely going to push wave 2 too quickly, and then you can look to freeze it outside your tower. Wave 3 will come and hold it, and then you'll be under your tower able to trade with him freely, and he's really far up the lane without ultimate, so his jungler can look to 3 camp him. And it's important to kill Olaf pre-6 because once he's 6, he can block a lot of CC. So a lot of junglers such as Sedge, Amumu, Rammus, whatever, they become quite useless for ganking. And if you're able to kill him pre-6, then you've got a lead on him, and it's a lot less scary for his all-in threat. Next point, look to block his base timings. Now, for the most part, the Olaf's reverse will have Ghost and Flash, which means they don't have TP to get back to lane, which means if they ever miss their recall opportunity and get stuck in the lane, it's very punishing for them. And as you saw in my laney phase examples, I based after I crashed big waves, but you'll miss a lot of Olafs that make mistakes and they don't take their base timer. They'll stick around and try to poke you or whatever. And Olaf actually has some mana problems if you stay in the lane too long and throw too many axes, that if they get low enough mana, then you're not scared of getting all in anymore. You can build a wave in return, keep him trapped under tower, and now he's basically unable to base, and he's unable to all in you because he's low mana, low resources. He can't kill you, and it's a really bad state for him to be in, because if he were to base, have 4 HP, 4 mana, and item, he could all in you on your wave as it's coming into his tower. He could freeze it and all in you, like we showed in the lane phase example. But if he's too weak to kill you, then you're just going to crash the wave for free and keep him trapped. So it's easier said than done, but if you can block his base timings, it's really good. For the third point, kite out his ultimate. Now it's important to note that Olaf's ultimate only lasts 3 seconds unless he can auto attack or EU. So if you're able to kite him out for 3 seconds, then his ult's going to drop and you have a better chance of living or re-engaging on him. And an easy way to kite him out is phase rush, because it'll remove the slow from his axe and give you move speed. You can actually get away from him. And even though not a lot of top champions can take this rune, you can actually take it on champs that don't primarily use it. So for example, if you're to play Ornn vs Olaf, you could actually take Phase Rush in this matchup, and when he runs at you with Ghost, QW auto, boost away, and once you've made enough space and his ulti runs out, then you can look to ulti and turn on him. Now, there are a lot of champs you can do this on. Kennen, you don't normally take Phase Rush, but you can. Jace is good at it, so on and so forth. But don't take it on every champ, right? Don't take Phase Rush on Fiora. Just champions that really struggle to kite him out, and you'll probably die if you don't have it. Next point is pretty straightforward. If you're counter picking him, make sure it's a champion that can kite out his ultimate easily. So let's say Jax, you can wall jump away, Riven, Rengar, a lot of dashes and so on. Champions that can kite out his ultimate and look to re-engage on him are best if you're countering him. And for the last point, prioritize higher damage builds. Now, I've got a good example of this, where if you were to pick Renekton into Olaf and you take Goredrinker and TP, he's probably going to dominate you at most stages of the game. But if you have Blade of the Ruined King and Ignite, you can actually beat him in a lot of scenarios where he would beat you, because your damage is so much higher. You have Ignite to cut his healing, extra damage, and even in lane, when you take a small trade, dash onto him, auto W, dash away, he's going to be about 2/3 HP. On your next combo, you can just kill him, because you do so much damage, and you're able to burst him before he can stay in the fight for a long time. Because Olaf thrives in a long fight, where you can get a lot of Qs and E's off, but if you have a max damage build set up, you can just kill him instantly. It makes this champion very hard to play. And there are a lot of examples like this, where Jax, normally you go Sundra TP, you can take Ignite Triforce, Pantheon, you can take Bork Ignite, etc. And not every champion can do this, of course. You can't go full damage Ornn, for example. But there are a lot of champions that I see people build suboptimal on when they verse Olaf, where if you were to build very aggressively and take Ignite, you can actually win the matchup quite hard. Now to finish up, we're going to go through the key takeaways, which are the main points I really want you to burn into your brain as you're learning this champion. First one being abuse your level 1 strength, and we covered this in the level 1 portion of the guide, but basically look to dominate the enemy jungler or your lane from level 1. Second being be patient with your full commit. Now of course as soon as you see a fight about to start, it is tempting to just ghost ulti through their team, but it's better, more often than not, to be patient and wait for the backline to make a positioning error, someone to waste their gap closer, something like this that really opens up your champion to chase them down a lot easier. Next point being for solo kills, start with the axe. So the go fishing metaphor, just keep chucking hooks out, keep chucking axes out, and once it hits, then you ghost and run them down. You don't run them down trying to hit axe on them once they see your ghost they're trying to dodge. It's much easier to start with axe. Next point being the more crowd control and less damage their comp has, the better. And we touched on that in the drafting point of the guide, where if you see champs like Sejuani, Nautilus, Leona, whose kits are only crowd control, your champ's much more valuable. And when you see champs that are only damage and kiting, like Kindred, Vayne, Cassio, your champs are less valuable. And for the final one, be a part of as many early fights and skirmishes as possible. Now this doesn't mean be delusional. If your teammate gets caught before Dragon and dies, you probably don't want to fight that anyway. You want to go to the other side and look for fights. But it just means for the most part, you want to be not making the mistakes. You want to be at this dragon ready with all your HP and mana, as many items as you can have, ready to fight at your strongest. And if your team makes a mistake, accept that. Don't force the fight, but you still want to be ready to fight as much as you can at early game when your champ's at its strongest. Okay guys, we're going to end it there, and as usual, feel free to let me know what champion or topic you'd love to see me cover. And I will be covering all champs eventually, but the ones that you guys love the most popular ones, are definitely the ones I'll look to cover sooner. So let me know, and yeah, I'll catch you next time.